I'll tell you what, one phrase you almost never hear in a focus group is the thing that made me regret my vote. Like, people don't usually say they regret their vote. But the very first guy said, I regret my vote because of the Epstein stuff. But he's also the one who was super gung-ho about sending immigrants to foreign prisons. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Focus Group podcast. I'm Sarah Longwell, publisher of The Bulwark, and this week we are back, and I am pumped about it. I have been doing focus groups all summer, and I've been dying to talk to you guys about them. I did have to take a little hiatus on the show this summer because I got some other projects I'm working on, and this show is quite a big lift, actually. But I'm super excited to catch you guys up on what we've been hearing and talk through all of it. Here's a sampling of just some of the things that happened over the summer that we haven't fully addressed on this show. Trump bombed Iran. Maybe that feels like a million years ago, but that happened over the summer. He seized control of D.C. That's happening right now. The National Guard is here, taking over our D.C. police force. He's given everybody tariff whiplash, which my producer thinks we should call rifflash, which I don't think works. And he's still refusing to release the Epstein files. But overall, for a lot of swing voters, Donald Trump's presidency is going, this is the clinical term, meh, M-E-H. And that doesn't necessarily mean bad yet, but it's sort of like going toward bad. Trump settled into an equilibrium about 8 to 10 points underwater, according to Nate Silver's polling average. He's doing a bit better than that on immigration, where he's about 2 to 3 points underwater, and a lot worse on a bunch of economic measures, where he's about 12 to 24 points underwater. So today I want to bring the voter sentiments together with a guest who knows this president's brain better than most, Ashley Parker, staff writer at The Atlantic. Hey, Ashley, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Good. I don't think that you realize how exciting this is for our listeners, because we're back. Like, the people who are focus group junkies, like I am, they're like jonesing for these hits of focus groups. And I think they're going to love the fact that you are our first guest this season, because you have been writing a lot about Trump's first term. Now that you're over at The Atlantic, you left the Washington Post. And a few months ago, you and Michael Shearer published a lengthy feature on Trump's 4 years out of power and on his first 100 days back. You wrote that, and I quote, his time in the political wilderness is crucial to understanding the way he's exercising power now. What did you mean then, and how has that changed now that we're like 227 days in?
Sure. I think what we meant then, and I can't even remember if we had this line in the piece or not, but was this idea that it was like Jurassic Park, where the velociraptors had learned how to operate the door handles. And it was that when he was in the political wilderness, he and his team actually learned a lot of lessons. First of all, is that they had to, people forget, because it was actually relatively such a short period of time, but people forget after January 6th, sort of how left for dead Trump was politically. There was this sense that, like, forget about running for president again and winning. There was this sense that he was going to be a persona non grata in the Republican Party, right? And everyone was just done with him, and no one wanted to talk to him. And that actually only really lasted for about 6 weeks, maybe even less. Kevin McCarthy goes down. That's the first step to a rehab process. But in the process of clawing his way back from the political wilderness, he became emboldened. He also had been president once. He understood the levers of power better. A lot of his team sat there during those 4 years and just plotted what they would do when they came back, not just in terms of who they would take revenge on, but what policies they wanted to do and how they would get them done, right? What obscure immigration laws Stephen Miller could use that he hadn't been quite creative about the first time. And so you just saw this totally different Trump 2.0. And I think what's different now is, I guess, at the time we were writing that, I didn't even realize how right we were. I think we were going to see, we knew sort of it's a Trump surrounded by true loyalists now, right? You have people who are willing to do his bidding. Someone told us if Trump, in his first term, Trump would ask for something and you would have people who would tell him all the reasons he couldn't do it, right? All the reasons they would resign if he did do it, who would leak to the media about what a bad idea it is. This time, it's true MAGA loyalists. And someone told us for this article, look, if the president asks for something twice, we do it. That's our rule. They said the first, it has to be twice because look, he does say some crazy things, but if he asks for it twice, it means he wants to do it. And so all of these things from firing everyone that seemed benign, from firing everyone at the Kennedy Center, these were things the first time he would have been told, well, you can't do that. The board serves a certain chair and there'll be a public outcry. And so I guess I just didn't realize sort of how emboldened and how willing to crash through kind of the last remaining institutional barricades and guardrails he would be.
Yeah, I use that phrase a lot. The velociraptors have learned how to turn the doorknobs, because I think that's exactly right. So I want to get into the sound here. I don't want to, I want to give people what they came for. All the folks you're going to hear on this show are Biden to Trump voters. We've been doing a lot of different groups, but for this one, we're going to stick with our swing voters, because I think a lot of times what people want to know is Trump's doing all this stuff. Are people who were maybe kind of on the fence about voting for him, do they regret it? Are they like, oh my gosh, what have I done? How could I have voted for this? Because I do think that satisfies a certain need people have. They want to hear people say, I can't believe what he's doing. We got it wrong, and I'm sorry. And I think you're going to get maybe a little bit of that. Like, you're going to get a little of that. So we're bucketing our first 2 bits of sound into what's bad, what do voters think that what he's doing is bad, and then what's good. Because the fact is, there are things that people think Trump is doing that are good. So we do this in a lot of groups where we ask people to give Trump a letter grade. So when you hear people say, I'm a C or I'm a D and I gave it to him, that's why they're doing it. So let's listen to what people are thinking is bad right now. This show is sponsored by Sol. After a long day, I used to mix up a Boulevardier to relax. It was my go-to drink. But lately, I've been reaching for Sol's out-of-office gummies and drinks instead. They help me unwind and ease into my evening without alcohol or next day brain fog, which is the worst. If you do gummies and they give you brain fog, that's a no-go. They can't give you that hungover feeling the next day. Otherwise, what's the point? Sol is a wellness brand that believes feeling good should be fun and easy. Sol specializes in delicious hemp-derived THC and CBD products designed to boost your mood and help you unwind. Their best-selling out-of-office gummies were designed to provide a mild, relaxing buzz, boost your mood, and enhance creativity and relaxation. With 5 different strengths, you can tailor the dose to fit your vibe, from a gentle 1.5 milligram microdose, which is a little more my speed, to their newest 15 milligram gummy for a more elevated experience. We call that the Tim Miller Special here in the office. With wellness at the forefront, you can feel good about what you're putting in your body. All of Sol's products are made from organically farmed, USA-grown hemp and are vegan, gluten-free, low in sugar, and federally legal. A little bit to unwind at night to help you sleep, a 3 milligram, 1.5, like that's my speed. And so if you're looking for something that's it's going to lull you to sleep, you can watch a nice British murder mystery while you're doing it. Like, this is not your dad's THC situation. It's made for grownups today. So, I appreciate that they keep sending me these because I love them, and I think you will too if this is your speed. Bring on the good vibes and treat yourself to Sol today. Right now, Sol is offering my audience 30% off your entire order. Go to getsol.com and use the code TheFocusGroup. That's getsol.com, promo code TheFocusGroup for 30% off.
I think where the seed comes from, because it would have been much higher. Elon Musk, Epstein files, you can't make these big promises and bring people like Elon Musk in and then throw them out, especially when they don't have clearance. You can't say things about the Epstein files to get people to vote for you and then not do anything with them, which at the end of the day, who cares? The Epstein files don't affect my paycheck or my groceries, but there's too much wishy-washy. I wish there was more of a, this is how I'm going to be, or this is how I'm going to be, and just stick with that versus that wishy-washy nature of, let's change the tariffs, let's change the healthcare, let's change, who I'm talking to today, because That's one of the issues I had with the Biden presidency was we looked like a joke in America.
I haven't seen any sort of massive changes, just like some polarizing or really extreme things going on, like deportations, or I know the big beautiful bill has a lot of big changes to healthcare and the economy and different programs like Medicare, Medicaid, different food subsidized programs. And then the tariffs and those extreme taxes on imported goods. So I feel like there's just a lot of extremes going on, and I have yet to see the benefits of them. So that's why I gave him a D right now.
Every day I keep hearing something with the ICE, and they're like getting somebody like very like local now. God, now it's like 5 minutes away from me where they like capture people like every day. He's like buddy with like Putin. And like you're not sure like what side he's on with them. I thought he was supposed to be in the middle and trying to work things together. I don't know. He's very confusing, if he's. And then with the tariffs, first they were going to be 25%. Now they're going to be 15%. It just like changes all the time. Like what's going to happen with the cost of the tariff. So I don't know what's going on with that either. I don't think like anybody does. That's the problem.
Sometimes he can be crazy. I don't want someone crazy leading me onto the field. I know he's a tough guy, but you never know. He could do something irrational. We could all get blown up, nuclear bomb or something. So I give him a C. He kept saying he was the president of peace. He kept giving Obama digs, and here he is getting us into a war. And I'm lucky my son just got out of the Navy 2 months ago. If that would have happened now, my son was in there, that would have been crazy.
Having Elon Musk come in and cut the services and the people's jobs that he did, the way that he did to, quote, save money, and then come in with this big, huge bill, beautiful bill that's going to put us into trillions of dollars worth of debt is sort of ironic in and of itself.
I had a lot of optimism, like I said, him coming back into the office, but it looks like everything he's done is basically just to benefit himself and his family. All the deals he's doing in the Middle East, like I said, the unnecessary tariffs, and then we're going to hold off on the tariffs, and then dismantling all of the agencies. Like I said, Department of Education, I think just, he's about to fire people in the federal government, losing their jobs left and right. These are people who've been tenured and, they have a critical part in helping the government run. It's just like everything now is just destruction and chaos. I think the jet that he was supposed to, get, and he said, they offered it to me for free, and then it came back. So it's like everything he's doing is basically enriching his family. I'm not saying, hey, you're not supposed to, make money, but I thought we were supposed to be helping the middle class here. Like I said, just passed the Better Business Bill. And of course, we see all the cuts that are going to happen across the board for, people with Medicaid and Social Security and things of that nature. And it's just like middle class is what sustains the country. If you have no middle class, you have no country.
So, Ashley, I think it's really instructive about how much of this is just like a grab bag of stuff. Like there wasn't a thing. It was just a lot of different things.
Yes.
And there's a lot more Epstein sound where that came from. I promise. I just, can't put it all in here right now. But that was all over this stuff. So here's my question for you. Sometimes people convince themselves that Trump is not driven by public opinion. Like he doesn't, care. But I think his constant chickening out on things like tariffs and other things are because he gets spooked by people freaking out. So how do Trump and his inner circle view their relationship with public opinion?
So he definitely cares about polls. That's very clear. And he's been conditioned to do this going back to The Apprentice, right? When he was on The Apprentice, I did a story on him in The Apprentice in 2015 when he was a candidate, 2016. And at that point, ratings were God to him. He would call these TV executives, did you see the latest ratings? And just like now, he would exaggerate them. So he sort of has an ability to dismiss the ratings, or in this case, the public polls he doesn't like, and exaggerate them. But at the end of the day, he knows when he's exaggerating, right? He knows where things stand. And so that's what he's doing with polling. He's certainly aware. And then more than polling even is sort of the feedback loop with the media. He is deeply aware of what he sees a little bit on social media, but mainly still kind of on cable news, or what comes across his desk on a podcast, or someone shows him a YouTube clip. And he is aware when a head of a bank goes on Fox News and says or Morning Joe and says these tariffs are going to tank the economy. He's aware of all of that, and he's constantly responding to that. One thing in covering him that's been interesting, and it still seems to be true, even though he can't run again, so there's a little less at stake, is that when he's sort of pulled between two conflicting imperatives, when there's kind of an outcry, when his base loses its mind, he almost always goes back to placating his base. So in his first term, sometimes he would maybe offer an olive branch on immigration, right? It's talking about being super tough on border security, but, maybe he's had a meeting with dreamers and, hey, he'll say like, these kids are the best among us. They came here through no fault of their own. They're valedictorians. They should be allowed to stay. Then when he gets that feedback loop from social media, from conservative media, that his base doesn't like that, he always gets worried about alienating his base and goes back to his base where they are, which I will say I've always found odd, because the one thing about Trump is he has this incredibly loyal base in this floor that he will never fall behind. And so the promise of him is he could lead his base somewhere, but he never does. If he chickens out, it's often in service of his base.
Yeah, I guess that's what I meant. Like, where you get this sort of sense that you feel like Trump is the one. I know he cares about polls, and I know he cares about the stock market because he treats it like a poll. So I take all that, but I guess what I meant is that he often is somebody who can be like, well, I can dictate this. Like, I can do whatever I want, and I'm not going to lose any votes. If I'm going to shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, like he has this sort of internal confidence about what he can do, but also, and Epstein is kind of an example of this. I mean, we're going to get into Epstein more, so I don't want to, jump too far ahead of ourselves, but that's one where there was a hue and cry. And rather than do the thing they all wanted him to do, which was release the Epstein files, he made a bunch of phone calls to Megyn Kelly and Charlie Kirk and said, you guys said you settle everybody down. And then they keep like re-releasing old stuff. And so he's a weird combination, I guess, of getting spooked or trying to placate people. I think that's right. But I also think he's got like some go-tos, right? It's like, they're mad about Epstein, so let's do something I know they'll love, which is, invade DC or send people to a gulag in Venezuela. I guess, I don't know. It's interesting. I guess what I was thinking is how much different his second term feels like than his first term, where I think people internally were telling him not to do stuff. And he would sort of listen, or he cared more if there was going to be a hue and cry. Like you pointed out, right? Kennedy Center. People are going to care about that. You're going to get yelled at. And like he backed off back then. And this time he's like, I don't care. Like I'm going for it.
Yeah. And you mentioned if Epstein's coming up, he has these sort of gold standards of distraction. I will also say a lot of these things are at the macro, to be clear, sending the National Guard into DC is not actually that popular, certainly not in DC at least, but he has these kind of 80-20 issues that have been his issues since the 80s. So like crime, like that's just an area where he's really comfortable, being sort of like the really tough guy on crime. Now, does that mean he may take it too far or make some political stumbles? Absolutely. But like crime is an area he's comfortable in. Hardline on immigration. He's been that way since the 80s. It's an area he's really comfortable. Again, I think one of those focus group people you mentioned is like, hey, you know what? Like I liked being tough on immigration in theory, but now that, ICE guys who aren't in uniform and are wearing like hoodies and masks are leaping out of a white van and nabbing my neighbor, like it's not so cool. Like, yeah, you can overstep, but that's one of his comfort zones.
When you were listening to that sound, was there anything that you were like, wow, that's interesting? Anything jump out at you?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to sort of like break the fourth wall in the sense that I listened to the whole focus group last night in preparation for this podcast. One thing that jumped out at me, and it was the first person you played, was how many people, you were right, it is a total grab bag, but just the one through line was how many people brought up Epstein unprompted as a frustration or anger point for any number of issues. Like, I knew that from my reporting, but it was interesting to hear again sort of how truly animating and maddening that is for a number of people who voted for Trump.
Yeah, we'll get into more of that. All right, let's listen to what the Biden-Trump voters, so these people that voted for Biden in 20, and they voted for Trump in 24. Let's listen to what they said was good, that they liked what President Trump is doing.
I really, really liked the fact that he's essentially shipping over particularly violent criminals that are part with gangs and cartels. I do like that he's shipping them over to like international prisons. And plus, being from Texas, we get a lot of those drug cartels and stuff that happen pretty regularly. I did notice that there was a dramatic decrease in that. I do like that, is that that's becoming less of a risk. Because I go to Dallas every now and then with my girlfriend to go to like concerts or just go on dates and stuff sometimes. And around the time when the Biden administration was still in effect, there was a lot more soft on crime attitude towards it. And it was very hectic. For context, we've had like license plates being stolen. I've had friends who had stuff broken into by their house, violent threats and stuff. And now all that seems to be a lot less common now.
I will always favor someone that rules with an iron fist versus doesn't do anything. So I think the fact that he is able to talk to Putin, he is able to talk to Ukraine, he is able to go talk to these leaders in other countries where we may not have full, and let's be honest, nuclear weapons could easily wipe us off the face of the earth. I like somebody that is willing, much like Nick said, to wheel and deal. He was a businessman, so I'm okay with that part of it. And I think he's doing far better this term as far as, actually getting in front of leaders.
I was overseas during the political campaign in 2024 when everyone was campaigning. And someone came up to me, hearing my accent, knowing that I was American, was like, your president should be in an elderly home. This is elder abuse, blah, blah, blah. Shortly after, Trump got shot. And I was in a Middle Eastern country, and people were like, he's such a badass, whatever. Not that that really matters, but at least depending on who you ask, the fact that Trump is very perhaps braggadocious and has the balls to meet with foreign leaders could be a good thing.
I like his traction. I do really agree with the undocumented workers and people not putting in to what this country has to give. While everyone else, I look at my paycheck and the taxes are crazy that come out of that. And these people are being able to be paid cash and not putting in any taxes and able to get different benefits.
His age is starting to show a little bit more and more every year, but it didn't, curve like it did for Biden when he started. And regardless, he can still speak coherently, strong. And so I do like that.
This show is also sponsored by Quince, one of my favorite sponsors. Fall is in full swing, and it's a perfect time to refresh your wardrobe with pieces that feel as good as they look. Luckily, Quince makes it easy to look polished, stay warm, and save big without compromising on quality. Quince has all the elevated essentials for fall. Think 100% Mongolian cashmere from $50, washable silk tops and skirts, and perfectly tailored denim, all at prices that feel too good to be true. I'm eyeing their wool coats. I love a wool coat. They look designer level, but they cost a fraction of the price, and the quality is just as good, if not better. I love the quality of Quince. I love how soft their stuff is. And Quince, if you're listening, you could send me one of those wool coats. I'll wear it. By partnering directly with ethical, that's important. Usually when it's cheap, it can maybe not be ethical, but Quince is ethical. Top tier factories and cutting out the middleman. Quince is able to deliver luxury quality pieces at half the price of similar brands. I got my favorite leather jacket from Quince. In fact, fall is coming, and so a lot of the Quince stuff I got is like warmer stuff. Like I got a great sweater that's kind of this color from Quince that I love to wear. I've got my brown leather jacket that is like my favorite piece of clothing that I own It's also one of the nicer pieces of clothing that I own. And so I'm pumped that it's getting cooler because my favorite clothes are fall clothes, and Quince has given me some of the best stuff in my closet. Quince is basically how I'm going to stay cozy this fall, and I love to be cozy. It's the kind of wardrobe upgrade that feels smart, stylish, and effortless. And you know what I love about clothes? When they're effortless. I have no effort to give to clothing, so thanks, Quince, for the effortless clothes. Keep it classic and cozy this fall with long-lasting staples from Quince. Go to quince.com/thefocusgroup for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/thefocusgroup to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/thefocusgroup. So I know we just heard a lot about immigration. We're going to do whole shows on that as we go through this season. But as we mentioned, or I would say my takeaway from listening to a lot of these voters throughout the summer is that the reason that Trump is usually on firm ground in a couple areas is because the voters are often with him. Like, they are with him more often on immigration. They're with him on crime. And they wanted something done about the economy, right? That he's a businessman. He can do something about the economy. If you ask me to tell you in 15 seconds why Trump won in 2024, it's those three issues coupled with Biden's age. And I also actually just want to point out that the same woman in that sound who said she liked Trump ruling with an iron fist was talking about how annoyed she was about the Epstein files in the first clip. But here's my question for you. They were talking about how he deals with foreign leaders. And I hear this all the time in focus groups. Like, I think a lot of us who are more close observers are like, this guy's getting punked by Putin. He's being humiliated by them. But average Americans see sort of just the pictures of him with other world leaders, and they feel like, look, that's an American president who can sort of stand toe to toe with Vladimir Putin. So they like the idea that he talks to them. I've always heard that from voters. But how has the rest of the world learned to deal with Trump differently this time? Like, Trump has learned to deal with the world differently. How has the world, the rest of these foreign leaders, how do they think about Trump? Because one European told you that Europe has learned that to treat Trump more like the Gulf states have done. What does that mean?
Yes, I will answer that, but I just wanted to make one observation about all those clips you just played. Yeah. To me, the through line also was, even though they chose different data points, and they chose data points in some cases that foreign policy officials would say are absolutely wrong, right? That he's getting rolled by these world leaders. The through line was strength, right? In every instance, it was just him being like tough and strong and a total badass in their minds. And that, like, to me, was what I was hearing, even though it was a grab bag of examples of that. But yes, we did a story on how world leaders have learned to deal with Trump, and it's a weird mix. It's a mix of flattery, which is always the case, right? So you've seen all of these countries and leaders nominate him for sort of almost laughable Nobel Peace Prizes, right? Sure. So that's one, but it can't be pure flattery, because Trump, like these focus group voters, respects strength, right? And so if you're just kind of coming as a pure supplicant, like, he doesn't love that either. So sometimes it's being tough. Trump has always kind of loved autocrats and dictators. He respects their strength. He came, I always kind of say, because I think it's true, that in his first term, he won the presidency and was expecting it to be a monarchy, and was kind of annoyed when he found out, these things have to go through Congress and, et cetera. There's these laws and other branches. You could argue sort of rendered Congress much more null and void in his return.
I would argue that, in fact.
In his return to power. But so then in terms of the person who told us, it's like the Gulf states, it's sort of lavishing him with gifts, right? Like the plane from the Qataris. And then another thing is sort of just knowing his psyche. So a couple of people, like, Trump actually really cares about the epistolary form, right? Like, he writes letters to people. He'll see an article and he'll rip it out and write in Sharpie what a horrible journalist you are and have an aide send it to you, or he'll praise you and send it to a lawmaker, great job with that statement. And Trump himself seems to value, like, him taking the time with his Sharpie to write a letter, and it also means something to him in return. So think of the Kim Jong-un love letters that he always called them. So for instance, the British came, and quite savvily, they came bearing a letter from King Charles, right? A handwritten letter that's like one of Trump's erogenous zones. Oddly, that meant something. And then that handwritten letter was playing on another thing Trump cares about, which is he loves ceremony and he loves parades and he loves pomp and circumstance. And so King Charles in a letter invites him to a rare second state visit to the UK. That means a lot. Trump also talks a lot about genes and heritage and how he has good genes. So you've seen some world leaders playing on, if it's a country where his ancestors are from or his great grandparents, they will play up that. And they also all use whatever angles they have. So the head of NATO, I could be getting this wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's the head of NATO who's a great golfer, right? That's his angle. He golfs with the president. And then the other thing is these world leaders all get together and kind of like war game among themselves. Like, what worked for you? What went off the rails at your Oval Office visit? How can we avoid being Zelensky in that blow up, right? How can we avoid being the South African president when things got really awkward? What's the smart thing to do? And it's sort of a hodgepodge of managing him in all of those ways.
The thought of other world leaders sitting around and trying to game out how to best appeal to Trump, I don't know, it makes me feel there's something quite gross about trying to appeal to a guy like Trump in the best way. Also, the thing that you said the words Sharpie and erogenous zones, which does he also like to communicate in pictures, Ashley? Are some of them erogenous pictures? Just yes or no. Give me a yes or no answer.
I'm just aware of the Sharpie.
Uh-huh. Okay, got it. All right. Now that we've set the table, I know you're all jonesing for us to talk about Epstein. So, without further ado, let's listen.
The other thing that was a big thing for me that this made me regret me voting for him was the disappearance of the Epstein client list. That was like one of the things that he ran on. And that was like the thing that sold me on voting for him in a lot of ways. I wanted the people that were involved in all that those activities to finally be brought to the light. And suddenly that list doesn't exist anymore. He gets passive aggressive when people ask about it. That type of immorality is just something I just personally can't abide by.
I just can't believe that he said what he said, that he was talking about that they'll release the files and his people said they'll release the files. And then he turned around one day and said, are we still talking about this? Da, 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 da. And I just, God, my eyes couldn't have rolled to the back of my head even further, as if we thought that wasn't plain, like, obvious, like, there's something that he doesn't want to talk about anymore. And it just made me so disappointed, hugely disappointed. It's the biggest disappointment that I've had with him so far.
Smell the smoke, but someone tells me there's nothing happening. And Trump was kind of opposite of that originally. He was going to say his opinion, whether it, pissed off everybody in the room or what. It's just the past few days with the whole issue and like the Epstein thing has actually probably shaped my grade worse. Of, you hand out binders, you do all this stuff, and like there's going to be this big reveal. And it's, like someone mentioned earlier, the reality show aspect of it. I mean, this is real stuff we're dealing with, like real, crimes that could have been committed that, to me personally, and on either side, and I used to not feel that way, was like anybody that's on the list, should be exposed.
I always love when Trump says, oh, I only met the guy once, but they have 50 different pictures of him with their arms around each other. I mean, it's like, come on, you got to be kidding me. I mean, that seems to be like the new thing. Oh, I only met the guy once for 20 minutes, come on. Yeah, I don't buy that for 1 second. I actually have an older brother and I have a cousin that graduated from MIT, and the president of MIT was forced to resign because they were, very heavily involved with Epstein. And I think they're going to find a lot of people high up. I think that's why they're not being very transparent.
There has to be a lot of high-powered people that have a lot of dark secrets that they don't want to get leaked out. And some of those secrets are being covered up by our commander-in-chief because he's involved. I mean, let's be honest, and we already know he's a convicted felon, multiple counts. So, you'd be naive of Americans to think that he's not going to protect himself and cover himself and his friends when they've done things that were unethical, whether it was sexual fetishes or the problem was with a porn star or whatever that he's on, that he's a felon for. So, I mean, it is what it is. The guy may be a good businessman and he may turn out to be a great president, but he has some weird fetishes and You know, he's a little bit of a weirdo.
Elon, he talked about it when he was there, and then he tried to throw it at us after he was gone. Why didn't you show it to us while you were there?
Do I think that there's some like huge smoking gun that's going to link Donald Trump to the sexual thing with children? No, because if Democrats had that originally, it would have been way out, like under that administration. So I think that as terrible as the issues with the children there and all that, I also think there's a whole other side of the Epstein thing of like money laundering when it comes to like Bill Gates across the country. So I think it's not so much, in my opinion, Trump's name's going to be on the list, but I think it would be one of those cases that would rock everybody in the world, because I think the whole entire world would feel like we're all played, that the sides that we're picking back between are really rubbing elbows together outside of our votes.
What I feel like makes him a good leader, because the thing is, we're all human. We're entitled to make mistakes, and people are going to have passes, whatever. But I think you need somebody in office like that is human. He's not like a perfect straight A student. Like, he's going to make mistakes. He's going to run himself, and like, it's just going to treat it as so and such.
I think it's massively hypocritical that Trump's administration is very, very heavy-handed on ICE, which, by the way, ICE does do a lot of stuff with, human sex trafficking. That's like one of the things that they do combat. And yet when it comes with politicians, celebrities, international entities, suddenly that same fervor that is involved with ICE, the same attitude, it would make sense to be consistent, both morally and ideologically consistent in treating this.
All right, the very first guy that we heard, which is, I'll tell you what, one phrase you almost never hear in a focus group is, the thing that made me regret my vote. Like, people don't usually say they regret their vote, but the very first guy said, I regret my vote because of the Epstein stuff. But he's also the one who was super gung-ho about sending immigrants to foreign prisons. And so like, he was like one of the big, what Trump's doing by sending immigrants to foreign prisons, good, but he would have changed his vote over Epstein. What do you think about the way Trump has handled the Epstein saga in the, like, I hope it goes away kind of way, which is sort of not how he usually approaches these things?
I mean, what's been interesting to me is that so far, and it kind of ebbs and flows, and it looks like now that Congress is coming back, it may come back into the media bloodstream again, but for someone who can just sort of bulldoze over or ping pong between controversies, with them having no real effect on him, right? I mean, you can start with his 2015 campaign and things that would have killed lesser nominees, bounce off of him. The Epstein stuff is just sticky in a way that we rarely see with Trump. And I don't know how he's tried a couple of different ways of handling it, right? Part of it is like he's sort of given his base orders, like his very loyal base orders, to just like move along, and they won't. And that's kind of rare. He's tried to address it in certain ways. For whatever reason, because this is so sticky, I actually don't know what he could do to make it go away, other than to release everything, whatever that may be. And even then, I don't know if it goes away, right? But that is at least the through line in these focus group participants, is that, and you heard a couple different things. One is that like what Epstein, there's some people who truly believe that like what Epstein was doing is so abhorrent, right? Like the guy who said he regretted his vote, that like, how can we not, right? That it is sort of like a moral red line, and like Trump has a duty to the world. It's also interesting. Some people spoke about, and I don't know if you played all these clips, but some people spoke about like, look, we know politicians are politicians. They make these promises during the campaign about Medicare, Medicaid, or this and that, but like they can't really do it. You know, there's not actually going to end a war on day one. That's a little outside of his control. That involves Russia and Ukraine. Or we know Congress actually has to pass his legislation, but this is something that he actually has the single-handed power to do, right? So they hold him responsible in that way. And then this is a president who has fanned conspiracy theories. And so he has a base that is primed to believe conspiracy theories. And to be clear, I sort of don't know what I don't know about Epstein. So I'm not saying that I think there's some very legitimate questions and there's some conspiracy theories, but I think one or two of the people you played sort of had some other conspiracies about Epstein, right? Maybe involving money laundering, but like this thing is just sort of like like kudzu moss. It's just like spreading over everything in a way that is even outside of his control.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on the Epstein stuff because it was mostly all summer. I mean, we just heard voters talk about it all summer. And I'll say a couple of things that were interesting. The swingier groups brought it up more oftentimes than the super Trumpy groups. And I think that's because they've gotten the message that this is either, I don't know, I think there's sort of different reasons. Some of it might be that some of the Trumpier groups are just, they're actually less online, some of them, and they're older, they're more devoted to Trump in a kind of like, I want his economic businessman brain, whatever. But a lot of these swingier voters cared about Epstein. And that was like really evident in the Biden to Trump groups. The other thing I would say is that it's funny the way some of them do have a moral red line about it. They're like, this is about people raping children, child sex rings, which, by the way, on the right, the super duper swampy right, like the child sex rings, like that's why somebody showed up at Comet Pizza with a gun.
It's the QAnon.
Like this is it's QAnon. Like this is sort of deep in this bloodstream. And so Trump is supposed to be the QAnon hero. He's supposed to be the guy who fixes this. And I think, though, that they do tell themselves, and you heard one person say it, this idea that if Trump was in the files, because this is what strikes me about this sound, is it's not a lot of people accusing Trump. They're all just like, he said he was going to do it, and he's not, and I'm mad about it. Not a ton of people are speculating, not nobody, but I mean, there's one guy in there who says, look, we all know why this is happening. It's because Trump's in there. But the amount of denial from Trump voters and even from others to sort of be like, I don't know why he's not releasing this. I don't know why everyone on his team said that they were going to do it and now they're not. Most people sort of don't accuse Trump, which I find odd, I guess, knowing what we know about Trump's history, both with Epstein and with women. And it's like interesting to me how much leeway he gets on. He must have some reason, like he's protecting someone else, not he's protecting himself.
It's interesting too because we know he's in the Epstein, or we know that he was told by his attorney general that he's in the Epstein files. It's worth noting that doesn't be sort of being in, or I guess by the Epstein files, I mean like Epstein's orbit, and just being in that orbit does not mean guilt. And so I will say, and again, I don't know how much of this resonated, but there was a period before it came out that he had been told he was in the Epstein files where I had a hunch that it was going to come out that he was, because you started hearing from the White House and from his allies, like, look, anyone can tell an FBI tip line anything, right? Like we need to protect all the innocent people, like let's say there's 2,000 people in my cell phone contacts. I shouldn't be responsible for all of their behavior. What if someone falsely implicates me, so that was a talking point. And I don't know if that is why people are not blaming him, because that talking point has kind of hit, like just because you knew Jeffrey Epstein doesn't mean you did something illegal, or if it's just more of Trump's superpower and people who have voted for him are willing to give him the benefit of the doubt about a number of things.
Yeah. What I do hear though is that there's a lot of people who don't want to let this go because they think the harm was real. And and that I think is why there's two reasons why I think it's sticky. One is, again, like how much this kind of sexual harm to children is part of QAnon and a lot of things that are baked deep into
and an understandable moral red line.
Yeah, right. And
yeah.
Of course, and actually one of the guys in here who was sort of talking about it like, oh, well, we know, people do crazy things and everybody's not perfect. And you're like, in the context of what Epstein did, that feels that's not one of these things we just wave away.
Right.
Like people are going to wave away Stormy Daniels and the paperwork and maybe the Miss USA and maybe even E. Jean Carroll. But like if he was participating in a pedophile ring, that's like a different thing altogether. But what do you make of Trump's absolute? I actually think we don't make enough of how weird Trump is being about anything coming out. Because if he is in the Epstein files in ways that are innocuous or easily disprovable
Benign,
relatively benign, so okay, then make that case. Instead, it's the Streisand effect of him refusing and trying to get everybody to shut up, to me, is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And I think it's strange that actually we're not all talking about it all the time until he does it.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting to me, I mean, again, I don't know what I don't know. Like, I would like to know everything about this as well, and I'm not a particular conspiracy theorist. But what's interesting to me is, again, just having covered Trump from that perspective, is it's like the rare thing. It's not just that it's sticky, but it's the rare thing he's lost control over, because you also keep in mind that during the campaign, he didn't really run on Epstein. Like, you talk to these voters, and there is like this deep, acute sense that Trump at every rally, written on the teleprompter, was, and then on day one, I'm going to sign an executive order releasing the Epstein files. That's not what it was. It was never on a teleprompter. I am pretty sure it was never spoken from a rally stage. I believe from Trump's mouth, I believe he addressed it about twice. Once was when he was asked kind of broadly, are you good will you commit to releasing JFK files, the MLK files, and the Epstein files? And even then, during the campaign, Trump equivocated on Epstein, right? He's like, MLK definitely, JFK definitely, Epstein, we'll have to see. And so it's this weird thing that, again, he actually didn't fan. It sort of took on a life of its own in the campaign. It was fanned by QAnon, and it was fanned by his base, and it was fanned by all number of people, but not him. And it followed him into the White House. And he is someone who is generally agree or disagree with his policies and his behavior, but he is sort of a master, right? Like, he's on a stage and he realizes that he's losing a little audience interest, right? And he does the weave to get them back. And he can, I've covered all these politicians, and Trump is the only person who, and, normally you talk to politicians and it's like, for them to remember Hillary Clinton or Biden or Jeb Bush's slogan, right? They have to see it on like 15 TV ads and 10 YouTube pre-rolls and 1 rally and 4 mailers. And like, Trump says something at a rally once, like Space Force. And I'm like, that's weird. And then by the end of the speech, like, everyone's chanting back, Space Force, Space Force, Space Force. And again, it's just, and even again, during his assassination attempt, it's like an instinctual sense of like what the moment for him politically calls for, to rise up with blood on his face and pump his fist and chant, fight, fight, fight. And what's also so striking to me is not just the stickiness, but like, he never really had control of this. It kind of got ahead of him in a way that things don't. And it's now just snowballed in a way he's really not controlling.
Yeah, but I would just want to add to that, because I agree. He's slippery in this way where it's sort of like Biden, where everybody thinks Biden said he was going to be a one-term president, but instead he kind of said it one time that he was going to be a bridge to the next generation. And otherwise he didn't say it, but lots of people around Biden said it. Like, well, I'm sure he'll be a one-term president. And the thing with Trump is that Bondi and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, they talked about it endlessly.
100%.
And so when people saw, and when Pam Bondi went on TV as Attorney General early in her tenure and said, Donald Trump has told me to get these files out, they're on my desk, and the president has said get these out, people heard that as Trump is going to, like, they assumed Trump was going to make it a priority in a way that, I agree with you, Trump himself actually kept distance from, though that in itself, again, it's like then Kash Patel, Pam Bondi all get in a position where they're ready to do something about this. And then Trump goes, no, you can't. And they all are like, uh-oh, what do I do now?
And the irony is by not sort of fully releasing whatever there is to release, it's not like it's a great news cycle for Trump, because every footage is like his very positive quote about Jeffrey Epstein to New York Magazine, noting that Jeffrey Epstein likes younger women, which takes on a different sheen when we know he's involved in pedophilia, right, and sex trafficking. Our photos of the two of them together are them kind of laughing and whispering and kind of like pointing at a party. None of that sort of B-roll, which Trump is acutely aware of, is positive for him. And that B-roll kind of exists in perpetuity until we reach a conclusion.
But Ashley, this is the thing that I can't get. right? You just see, he's a master, right? He understands PR better than everybody. So one of the things he knows is that you got a crisis on your hands, you tell it all, you tell the truth, you tell it fast, you get it out there, right? You get it done with. His trying to keep a lid on this has prolonged this story in ways that seem unfathomable, where he's got Congress blocking for him, whatever. It's like, what is in there that he is hiding? It's just funny for him to run as I'm going to be the most transparent president in history. And we've got all these people on the right being like, he'll be so transparent. He'll be so good for free speech. Curb free speech. The cops and ICE cover their faces. They cover up the Epstein files. Like, it's weird. It's just, I think it's weirder than weird. But we can leave it at that. Now let's go to the covering up their faces. Speaking of which, let's turn to DC. We're going to have more Epstein stuff as we go through this season of the pod. I assure you, because it's not an issue that's going away. So Dave, do you live here? Well, actually, I don't want to ask you exactly where you live, but do you live in the DC metro area as I do?
I live in DC.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you're in the occupied zone right now.
I am.
So Trump has seized control of DC and the police force temporarily. And I guess I was surprised by some parts of the Biden to Trump voter reaction. So let's listen.
Are there better ways that we could be using our military, first of all? And also, like, is it just another, I don't know, intimidation factor? I think DC police in general has just a history of like corruption. So like, should we probably use those resources to better their force? Like, why are we using our federal resources in DC? So I don't know. I guess I said I was a fence sitter, but maybe I'm leaning more towards I hate it, just because that area in general, like we could be just empowering our police force better.
I don't think 30 days is enough for a result, but we'll see. I mean, I don't think it's egregious that he's doing it because he can. But after the 30 days is where I'll have more of a real stance on it.
I guess I'm on the fence because I firmly believe we have the right to, not be quartered by soldiers and not to be illegal searched and seized. But at the same time, is that not what our military is for, is protection? So if there's something that necessarily needs to be, the military has to be there for protection, our National Guard has to step in, I totally agree with that. But if this is a personal thing, I just don't think police forces can be fixed as quickly. I have a lot of cousins that were in the military and police officers. And, one of my uncles is a police officer, and he said, I know people want police reform, but it doesn't happen that quick.
I look at everything like it's a job, right? If they're not doing their job, the DC police and the city can't handle it. Like, you see the crime rate is horrible. It's like Houston. I mean, Democratic ran the mayor, right? Like, again, like if you have crime rates and your city can't handle it, then if you have to have somebody else, your boss has to come in and clean it up, it just makes a bad reflection. So to me, it just kind of points out like, hey, they're not doing their job. And yes, maybe our military, like they're National Guard. What else would they be doing? I mean, they're sitting on a base somewhere, like counting bullets or something. Like they're not doing much anyway. So we just have them there. They do other things when we need it, but day to day, not a lot. So for them to work too, like they're getting paid, so let them go walk the streets for a little bit, show some presence. Like in Mexico, when you get off a cruise ship, you see the military standing out there. They're just the presence, just so that hey, don't act stupid.
You and Nancy Youssef published a piece last week in The Atlantic called "Why is the National Guard in D.C.? Even they don't know." And I want you to talk about your reporting in that. But what's really interesting to me is how many of the troops in your piece were sort of like these voters, where they're like, to the extent that people don't like this, it's more about a waste of resources and not the creeping authoritarianism of installing the American military in one of our cities. But tell us about your reporting.
Yeah, we sort of conceived of it as a sort of a postcard from occupied Washington, because living, in the area like you, I'm sure you have so many friends, and asking like, what is it actually like? Right. And so we kind of wanted to get a sense of that. And just as you live in DC, so there are people, who are worried that Washington is a blueprint that Trump will try to impose on other cities. And there's certain challenges about that we can get into if you want, and that it is sort of, kind of frog in the boiling water, like acclimating America to a sweeping push towards authoritarianism using the military as our nation's police force. But most of the concerns from everyone were far more quotidian, right? There was the kind of like absurdity of this. These people, I think there were 6 states that sent National Guardsmen, and about half were from DC National Guard, half were from outside. So they're away from their jobs. They're away from their families. They sometimes pay penalties being away from their jobs. They can't be fired, but there can be other penalties when they're away from their jobs. And you're leaving your family, you're leaving your job to come to DC to kind of like perform Boy Scout merit badge activities, right? You're going to clear brush and then chop up that wood and then spread it with wheelbarrows and mulch, right? This was not in my piece because I learned about it afterwards, but someone told me, walking by the EEOB right by the White House, and they passed the National Guard. There's all the food trucks down there, the Mr. Softy trucks, and it's like the National Guard with like their rifles and like their soft serve, right? Like it just seems absurd. There's the National Guard, patrolling the wharf, where it sometimes feels like they're guarding the yachts, right? And so there's kind of the guard that's like, what? This is a waste. This isn't what we're trained for, right? So there's that. Then there's the people of DC who don't want the guard there, who are offended by Trump's depiction of DC as sort of a hellscape, right? Like a crime-ridden hellscape. They resent that. They don't like the guard. They're angry at the guard. And then there's even the people who don't mind the guard, who don't necessarily think this is the best way to solve these problems, that it probably should be a local police force or more social service resources. But, I stood at Union Station for a while for this story one day, and there were people who came up to the National Guard and quietly flashed them thumbs up and gave them Gatorades. And one man said, and this is true, said, look, since you have been here, normally when you walk by Union Station, smells like pot, right? It's not the end of the world. I can't remember in DC if it's legal or decriminalized, but like whatever, it's not like a huge crime issue, but it is like a quality of life issue. A lot of people don't like kind of the contact high. And he said, like, and since you've been here, there's no odor of marijuana. And again, normally this person said, I see at least 3 or 4 kids fair jumping every day. And again, it's not in terms of the way crimes go, it's not the worst crime, but like, since you've been here, there's been no fair jumpers. And so, but even those people in DC who were kind of appreciative of the National Guard were doing so from like a point of dissatisfaction. It was like they felt so, and everyone in DC, I'm sure you have stories, I certainly have stories, has run-ins with crime, right? Like a lot of property crime. And there was a period when I would walk my 6-year-old to, when she was younger, to pre-K. Like I had a crime map implanted. I knew every place we passed on the less than mile walk, probably half-mile walk to her pre-K, where there had been a carjacking, where there had been a mugging, where there had been a shooting, where there had been a murder, where there had been a stabbing, right? And so there were residents who also were just like, yeah, like crime is an issue. It's a real issue, but we want DC to handle it. We don't think the military is required. And so it was kind of a stew of all of these forces is what you're seeing in DC right now.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. But here's my question. The person I find most puzzling is Muriel Bowser, because I can't make heads or tails of the way she's responding. Because if you're the mayor of DC, you'd think you would at least be offended by the notion that, like, you can't do your job. You've created a hellscape and I got to come in here and bail you out. And so her response has sort of been to be like, thank you, sir. May I have another? It's not that bad, but it has been wild. And I think she could be saying, hey, you cut more than $1 billion out of DC's budget. Give it to me. I'll hire more cops. People know. And like, not this, we're going to have military in our streets. That's not how she's acting. So what do you make of the way that she has responded to this?
I mean, you and me both, right? It is confusing. I mean, in some ways, what I sort of just described to you and what we outline in our piece is a real ambivalence, like a real frustration and ambivalence from the Guard, from the residents of DC, et cetera. And I think in some ways, her response, the most charitable thing it feels like, is that she is channeling that ambivalence. Because there was one press conference where she kind of, to your point, says like, thank you, Trump, may I have another, sir? And then a reporter said, what is your message to nervous Hispanic workers? And she basically says like, I'm so sorry you're living in terror. Right. So like those things, like it seems like a huge contradiction. Kind of at best, she's maybe grappling with this. And I guess I also wonder, because DC does not quite have the same protections as an actual state, right? Because of home rule. I mean, I wonder if she is more hamstrung in what she can do. And her concern is if she pushes him too far, she's going to lose even more federal dollars. And, because she has tried to play nice with him on a number of things, right? From right when he was elected, removing the Black Lives Matter plaza right by the White House. So she may feel like she has a little less leverage than, say, mayor of Chicago, governor of California.
Yeah. Well, I am somebody who I sort of drives me crazy when people are like, whoa, crime is going down and whatever. I'm sort of like, okay, like don't not be realistic about what it is. Anybody who lives in DC knows carjackings have been a real problem. Like
everyone has a story.
Everyone's got a story. Everyone's got a thing. And it is a problem. And we would like to see DC cops be more responsive about things. I think that there's probably, that's one of the reasons they can get away with this. And so it is, but on one hand, with Muriel Bowser, I guess there's part of me that's like, the easy way to do this is to be like, okay, you've made your point and heard, give me my money and like, I'll handle this or something. Like not the sort of, even though I say, yes, crime is a problem and I think DC should be better about it. On the other hand, I'm also like, have a little pride in your city. Like have a little pride in running your city. Have a little pride in, I don't know. The idea that, listen, okay, so here's a different analogy. Let me say it a different way. You could stop all traffic accidents. You stop all highway deaths if you lower the speed limit to 30 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. People don't do that because it impinges on the freedom to drive faster. And right. And it's like, there's always a tension. It
impinges on getting places.
Yeah. Right. There's always a tension between freedom and safety. Like freedom and safety are sort of in constant tension. And the conservatives that I grew up alongside of, we didn't trust the federal government to be the ones to do this. You list local governments, the places that are closest. They're the ones that handle this stuff. And so it's funny. People are both, they are ambivalent, but also the guy who threw the Subway sandwich is now a local hero.
Yeah.
And part of it too is the masking of the agents. I think it's one thing if people, you sort of expect Americans, even the National Guard, like when you talk about them with their soft serve, that's such a,
it's kind of wholesome. It's like a,
it's a
Norman
gentle
Rockefeller,
image.
Rockwell rather, yeah.
And you're like, yeah, because you see people taking pictures with the National Guard sometimes around here because like you get tourists and they're like, oh.
I actually have to add, while I was writing the story, I happened to look at my 14-year-old's Instagram, and she happens to be wearing like a camo crop top, and she has posted a picture of her posing with the National Guard by her school under the caption "Twinsies," right? Like there's sort of these. But the thing you mentioned, so like you mentioned the masking and everything. What's tricky about DC that we tried to get into our piece is like, there's also ICE deployed here. There's DEA deployed here. There's FBI deployed here. Trump has kind of taken control of the DC police. And that is all much more deeply troubling and frightening to the DMV population. In a weird way, the National Guard has kind of become the public face of this. So you have ICE agents popping out of vans, not being identified as ICE agents, and 9 of them wrestling Uber delivery driver to the ground. But then you have the National Guard with like their ice cream by the National Mall, like, little Boy Scout tourists.
And then like planting trees. I know it is, there's really and actually, just since we're talking about it, because I want to be really clear that my point is that the fact that there is crime in DC and the fact that we care about it does not to me in any way justify the way, like the occupation right now feels much more unsafe to me than it did. I mean, like you hear sirens constantly now. You'll be the streets that you walk on every day, like you're on 14th Street, and like they're just grabbing some Uber Eats guy and like wrestling him to the ground, and like that does not make me feel safer. And so like I am somebody
there's videos of kids pushing through ICE agents on their way to the first day of school, right? Like
I hate it so much.
there's like there's dystopian images and kind of like wholesome Americana. I'm not saying that the National Guard is, but like it's this real dichotomy that is very complicated.
It is complicated, or it's a complicated visual. There are complications to how one, sort of untangles the issues. But I will just say for myself, part of what is frustrating is that listening to these voters, they are saying, I don't like crime happening in cities, right? People don't like crime. And I try to sort of made this point on Twitter at some point where I'm like, I listen to voters all the time, man. Immigration and crime, they just care about it a ton. Like you hear it all the time. People want to feel safe. And I think people are justified in wanting to feel safe. That is a normal thing for people to want. They want their kids to feel safe. They themselves want to feel safe. The idea, though, that we are living in a state of emergency in Washington, D.C. that required Trump to send ICE agents here and everybody else is ridiculous. And it is Trump's attempt to sort of start to normalize the authoritarian takeover, him personalizing the military for his own ends and using crime as an issue, a projection, if I might add, from his own crimes. I think there's a little bit of I want to change the conversation. This is the conversation I want to have.
Yeah, and some voters articulated this, or not voters, DC residents, also voters, articulated this to me, that two things can be true, right? That they don't like the fact that they were out with their kid when there was a stabbing on the metro, and also they don't like what Trump's doing, and they don't want to bring in the National Guard. And the other thing you mentioned, and it just reminds me of Democrats writ large, is when residents of cities complain about crime, there is a tendency to be like, but crime's going down. How dare you? And what it reminds me of, frankly, is Biden with the economy, because I remember there were fantastic economic indicators. He had some really good economic indicators. But like, if everyone in their own life doesn't feel them, or everyone in their own life has an anecdote about eggs being, $15, or now suddenly having to go to 3 grocery stores to kind of get the best deals and use the best coupons in a way they didn't 3 years ago. It's the same with crime. It's a thing that people have to feel.
Well, and this to me is always a bit of when people talk about messaging and bad messaging. This is a great example of it, because Biden's economy was a tremendous recovery. It was a tremendous recovery from an extraordinarily difficult time that COVID gave us, where supply chains were disrupted, the inflation was going up. And so Biden had the envy of the world's economy as everybody was trying to dig out from COVID. That didn't mean that he had an excellent economy. It meant he was doing an excellent job. And so if I think if Biden had created an environment in which he said, we have so much more work to do, people are still hurting so much, and I hear about it all the time, and these prices are too high, but we are beating the rest of the world in this recovery. I am leading us out of this. We are moving forward, right? And it's sort of the same way with, to say, well, crime is going down. People are like, don't deny that, like, crime exists. It's still high. It was extremely high during COVID. I mean, you lived here during COVID. Everything was boarded up downtown. And it was a really like frightening kind of time. And there was so many of the sort of landmarks and the parks, like people are living in them, and which is that's not even a crime issue. That's an issue of like, there's there's pain everywhere too. Like, it's just like, it's a sad sort of state of things, and people don't feel good about that. And so the fact that we're recovering from that really sort of high place is not the same thing as people feel safe in this city. And so there's like, you need people who run these cities to take crime more seriously than they do, talk about it more, understand that their residents deserve to feel safe in those cities, while at the same time, I think being unequivocal about this authoritarian takeover is not how you solve these problems. And like, I'm going to lead my state or my city, and like, you get out of here, Donald Trump. Is my personal opinion. You reporter do not have to do that. Anyway, okay. Ashley Parker, you've been such a good sport coming on, being our first guest for this season. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you for listening to another episode of the Focus Group podcast. We'll be back next week with a lot more to update you on, play you some more sound from over the summer. Take care out there.